a Russian delegation visited North Korea to negotiate new arms shipments. This time, the talks were overseen by the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Lavrov. He met with his North Korean counterpart, Cho Sun-hui, and of course, with the dictator Kim Jong Un. He not only expressed support for the Kremlin, but also promised to unconditionally approve any actions taken by his ally, including the war against Ukraine. In turn, Lavrov did not rule out the possibility of sending North Korean troops to the Ukrainian front. Could this be the Kremlin's new top priority? Let's figure it out now. Since February 24, 2022, there have been at least 20 visits between North Korea and Russia at the ministerial level or higher. 18 of those took place in 2024. Even Putin, who is banned from traveling abroad, visited there in June. In 2025, they decided not to fall behind those numbers. The Secretary of Russia's Security Council, Shoigu, visited North Korea several times, and on July 11th, the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Lavrov, arrived in Pyongyang for a 3-day visit. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported that the visit was part of the second stage of the so-called strategic dialogue. However, phrases like dialogue sound rather odd in this context. What we're really seeing is the active rapprochement of two authoritarian regimes. Among the topics discussed, according to propaganda media, is a possible visit by Kim Jong-il to Russia. The relationship between Moscow and Pyongyang is clearly deepening. At the meeting, Lavrov assured that Moscow supports North Korea's nuclear program and accused the US, South Korea, and Japan of, quote, building up military capabilities around North Korea. In response, Kim Jong-un stated that the Russian army, supposedly, will achieve victory in carrying out its sacred mission. That's exactly how he refers to Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine.
Kim Jong Un reaffirmed that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is ready to unconditionally support and encourage all the measures taken by the Russian leadership as regards the tackling of the root cause of the Ukrainian crisis in keeping with the spirit of the interstate treaty between the DPRK and Russia in the future, too. Clearly expressed at the talks were the will of the leaderships of the two countries to closely support and cooperate with each other in the journey for thoroughly safeguarding the core interests of the two countries. From a publication by the DPRK Central News Agency.
Why did the Kremlin receive such unconditional support from the North Korean dictator? It's actually quite simple. Pyongyang sends tens of thousands of containers filled with weapons to Russia, and in return receives what it can't get because of sanctions: technology, fuel, and get this, hundreds of thousands of tons of rice every year. According to estimates from the South Korean Institute for Defense Analyses, North Korea has already made about $20 billion from this partnership. However, North Korea's contribution to the continuation of the Russian Federation's war against Ukraine is also significant, according to the head of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense.
North Korea is now supplying as much as 40% of Russia's ammunition for the war in Ukraine as the partnership between Pyongyang and Moscow deepens. Those are good weapons. North Korea has huge stockpiles, and production goes on around the clock. Kirilo Budanov, chief of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, in an interview with Bloomberg.
But it's not just about weapons. Pyongyang is sending its soldiers to die under the Kremlin's command. For the first time, the president of Ukraine announced the presence of North Korean troops in the Kursk region in December 2024. According to South Korean intelligence estimates, from January to March 2025, Pyongyang lost about 4,700 of its soldiers in Russia's war against Ukraine. Ukrainian intelligence estimates the total number of soldiers North Korea has sent to the Russian Federation at 12,000.
A tangible and undeniable confirmation, in the most practical and significant sense, of your profound words can be clearly seen and observed in the valiant Kursk region, where numerous heroic and courageous servicemen of the esteemed Korean People's Army, together with their brave and dedicated Russian fighter comrades, have, at the immense cost of their precious blood and even their very lives, valiantly brought the ultimate liberation of the Kursk region much closer.
Initially, Moscow and Pyongyang pretended that there were no North Korean soldiers in the combat zone. Obviously, they were calculating the risks, how the international community would react, and how their own population would perceive it. After all, this isn't just an alliance, it's a unique precedent. One of the world's most closed dictatorships is officially entering someone else's war on the side of the aggressor. But the silence didn't last long. Soon after, Moscow publicly thanked Pyongyang for the cannon fodder. And in North Korea, they took the opportunity to portray the fallen soldiers not as voiceless victims of the regime, but as heroes. But North Korea's involvement in the war isn't a show of Kremlin strength. On the contrary, it's a sign of its critical weakness.
Given these losses, Putin is unable to risk another politically unpopular mobilization effort. Using non-Russian fighters buys Putin time to reconstitute his military, which Putin had pledged in 2024 to increase to 180,000 troops and 1.5 million active-duty military personnel. Though Putin had been recruiting from Somalia, Sierra Leone, Cuba, and Nepal, the partnership with North Korea offered more advantages and a much larger stream of troop deployment. Natasha Lindstedt, Professor, University of Essex, from Forbes publication.
This level of support from North Korea is not the limit. Pyongyang is gradually becoming not just a supplier of weapons, but you could say, a reserve base of troops for Moscow. Kim Jong Un then could triple the number of his soldiers fighting on Russia's side in the war against Ukraine. According to CNN, North Korea is preparing a new wave of 25 to 30,000 troops. According to journalists, the Russian Ministry of Defense is ready to provide North Korean soldiers with everything they need, uniforms, weapons, and ammunition, in order to integrate them into active units as quickly as possible. These forces could be deployed in the occupied territories of Ukraine, especially in the event of major offensive operations.
There are signs that Russian military aircraft are being refitted to carry personnel, reflecting the vast undertaking of moving tens of thousands of foreign troops across Russian Siberia, which shares a border with North Korea in its far southwest. Possible preparations for the new deployment, including the arrival of a ship linked to last year's deployments at a Russian port, and cargo aircraft at North Korea's Sunan airport, have been spotted on satellite imagery. From a CNN publication.
Such a scenario is entirely possible. At a press conference in Wonsan, Lavrov indirectly confirmed the information from South Korean and Ukrainian intelligence about Pyongyang's planned deployment of troops. He said that the decision to send North Korean soldiers to the Kursk region was entirely Kim Jong Un's initiative, and Moscow had no reason to refuse. So in this case as well, Pyongyang is free to decide for itself. Such statements always involve agreements or, at the very least, calculations and mutual interests. And it's not just Ukraine that's watching this. South Korea, North Korea's closest neighbor, is seriously concerned about the new military alliance. After all, if Kim Jong Un gains confidence in his army and in Russia's support, they will be the first ones at risk.
North Korea is now significantly increasing its military strength, primarily through cooperation with the Russian Federation and by gaining real combat experience for its soldiers. And this cannot help but affect the security environment. And in the end, for North Korea, the only real adversary is South Korea. There are no others, and they know this perfectly well.
According to South Korean intelligence, Pyongyang has already sent Moscow 28,000 containers with weapons and ammunition. Russia received about 12,152mm artillery shells. But the Kremlin needs more, both weapons and soldiers. The Russian Federation depends on supplies of weapons and manpower from North Korea. And this is the new reality. At the same time, cooperation with Pyongyang remains unstable, since at any moment Kim Jong Un could end it, having a more influential ally behind him, China. And Moscow can't do anything about it, so it keeps paying billions of dollars, sending tons of food, technology, and diplomatic gestures. All of this is to keep North Korea on its side.